What's up, everybody? Welcome to Heresy Financial. Got a great video planned for us today. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I'm sure by now you've heard a lot of people state that inflation erodes debt. Inflation makes it easier to pay off debt. I'm sure you've heard that from countless people. And if you pay attention to what goes on inside of your mind, you might notice that whenever you hear that, there's a little nagging question in the back of your mind, like, I guess that makes sense, but there's something that's not being explained here. There's something that just doesn't quite click for me here on how inflation and money printing and costs going up makes debt easier to pay off. And so we're going to dive in because there is a missing piece to this. There's a missing piece to this equation that is usually kind of assumed when people talk about how inflation makes debt easier to pay off. And so we're going to expose that, bring that out, and show how if this missing piece isn't there, then inflation doesn't actually make debt easier to pay off. So this missing piece has to be there that's assumed that will always be there. And then we're also going to explain why it's actually going to be there right now and going forward into the future. Full credit to George Gammon. He recently made a video about his real estate predictions through the end of for this year, and fantastic video. And in this video, he brought up this missing piece of the inflation versus debt equation. And so that's why I wanted to talk about this video, to flesh that out, because he said, hey, yeah, there's this missing piece. And so if you don't have this missing piece, inflation doesn't make debt easier to pay off. So in this video, towards the end of it, we're going to dive into the fact that it actually is there. It's not really a missing piece. We just need to explain it and show why it's actually going to be there. So enough hints, enough explanations. We're going to go fast. So hang on tight. Ready? Let's dive in. So here's the common story. Federal Reserve prints a bunch of money, banks expand the money supply through expansionary bank credit where they lend money into existence. All this new money comes into the economy, buys up products and services and assets, which bids up the prices of these products and services and assets, which is price inflation, and that makes the debt easier to pay off because you are paying off your old debt with dollars that are worth less than the dollars you originally borrowed in the first place. While technically true, this isn't the whole story. What they're focusing on, what this common explanation focuses on, is the quality of that money. They're saying, hey, you're paying it back with dollars that are worth less than they were worth when you borrowed them. But that explanation falls flat because it's not just about the quality of the dollars that you're borrowing and paying back. It's about the quantity of dollars. Because if the prices of goods and services, products, assets, if the prices go up of everything, this technically means that the dollars that are in existence are worth less than they were before. You need more of them to buy the same things. But who cares if you still have to pay back your old debt with these dollars just because they're worth less to society or to the economy overall? Doesn't really impact you, right? Because you still have to pay back your old debt, and probably your cost of living has gone up, so that's a double whammy on you. If you make $100,000 a year and every month you have to pay $3,000 in your debt service costs from your car payment, credit card, student loan, house payment, it could be really easy to get up to $3,000 or even higher, and then your cost of living goes up, it doesn't matter to you at all that the dollars you're using to pay off that debt is worth less. Because you're still making $100,000 per year and you still have $3,000 worth of debt to pay off every month. And then the costs and the prices of goods and services that you have to, continue your same standard of living, everything goes up. So you're actually worse off. That debt didn't help you in that situation. So the key is your income has to grow in order for this equation to work. If your income does not grow, then the only thing that happens is you become worse off than you were before. Your debt doesn't get any easier for you to pay off. So in the explanation that is typical, they say the quality of money goes down, which is why it's easier to pay off debt. But the underlying assumption in the quality of money going down is that the quantity at the same time is going up. And this is true in all of the three main areas that this applies to. This is government, corporations, and individuals across the board. Whether you're in any of those three categories, this same equation applies to you. If you've got debt and then the prices of what you're buying, your expenses go up, the only way that your debt gets easier to pay off is if your income goes up as well, whether you're government, corporation, or an individual. So let's look at all three of those, starting with government. Now, government has really three sources of income, and technically the third one is a subcategory of the second one. So the first way that they have income is through taxes. taxes, right? They just tax things and they bring in income from that. Now, because of the situation of the economy right now and the global outlook and everything happening, there's a good chance that tax receipts don't actually go up for the United States government. We're in the worst economic crisis we've ever been in. We have the worst unemployment numbers we've ever had. There's a very good chance that the tax rates are going to go up across the board, or at least for some areas, which means typically when tax rates go up, tax revenues either stay the same or drop a little because the taxes become a higher burden on an economy that's already burdened by a large economic crisis. And so you kind of suppress economic activity at least somewhat. And so there's at least somewhat of a chance that even if they increase tax rates, tax revenues won't increase as a result. And so let's say, for the sake of this argument, if we're saying, hey, inflation makes debt easier to pay off, let's say that one source of income, taxes, let's say they're not going to grow that source of income. So that's going to stay the same or maybe even go down. Well, what's the second source of income? The government borrows money, right? So they go out to the marketplace and they say, who wants to lend us money? We're definitely going to pay it back because we can pay back any amount we want because we've got a printer behind us. So who wants to lend us money? And so some people, primarily banks, are going to lend the United States government money. And then they'll pay that back, whether it's a 2-year, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, whatever the length of the loan is. They're going to pay that back with whatever the interest rate is at that time. Now, the economy right now, just like they're tapped out on taxes, the economy is also tapped out on lending to the government. So if you look at the source of income for the government right now, some of it comes from taxes, some of it comes from borrowing from the economy, some of it comes from borrowing from other economies like other central banks, but the majority of it actually comes from the Federal Reserve. Not directly. That's illegal. The Federal Reserve can't print money to directly loan to the government. That was, that check, that barrier was put in place when they started the Federal Reserve in 1913. But it's indirect now. It happens. It's just indirect. And so, yes, the banks are the ones who lend to the government. And then now the banks own this debt. And they say, hey, the government owes us this money. It's a 30-year loan. And then they say, hey, Federal Reserve, we don't want this anymore. Do you want this? And the Federal Reserve says, yeah, sure, we want that. We're just going to print some money. We're going to buy that loan from you. So now the government owes us money and you've got your reserves back. And so you can take those reserves and you can lend out, 10 or 100 times whatever your reserves amount are that we just gave you for this loan. So it's indirect, but the Federal Reserve printing indirectly finances the shortfall that the U.S. government has since it can't tax or borrow enough from the economy to pay for its expenses. So regardless of what happens to the economy, the government's income goes up as needed per the Fed. If the government's expenses goes up to whatever amount the U.S. government is going to decide to spend, the Federal Reserve funds that. Indirectly, but it's still the source of the funding. Even without tax receipts going up, the Federal Reserve can print money, buy the treasuries from the banks, and the banks are lending that money directly to the United States government. So even if tax receipts go to zero, all of the government spending can be financed by the money printer. Okay, enough about the government. Let's move on to the next section, because now we clearly see that no matter what happens, the government can make it so that they can pay off their debt. It's not a problem. There's some legal issues there, just to jump over the red tape and go through the loopholes to get the money from the Fed to pay all of the bills of the United States government. But essentially, they're just legal loopholes that can be overcome either by action, by stepping around the law, or you could even have Congress kind of redo the Federal Reserve Act in order to have the Federal Reserve directly able to monetize the debt, or to kind of fold them underneath the Treasury. There's a lot of things that they can do. Ultimately, it's just a matter of pen strokes in order to allow the United States government to spend whatever they want. So we know it's not an issue. We know that debt going up for the government is not an issue in terms of being able to pay off that debt, because they can always increase their income as needed. What about corporations though? Because corporations can't print their own money. So where do corporations get their money from? Well, corporations are one of the main recipients of newly created money. And where do they get that from? Number one, well, a lot of corporations get money from government contracts. Not all, but a lot of them do, especially defense companies. Number two, corporations are the main beneficiaries of all of the spending of all of the government employees. So everybody that the government sends a check to for being an employee, those people are all going to shop at Walmart or Target or Costco or Sam's Club. They're buying iPhones, they're paying their internet bills, So corporations are going to be the main beneficiaries of the spending of all of the government employees. In addition to just employees, they're going to be the main beneficiaries of any welfare spending that the government does, right? So all the healthcare companies are going to be the main beneficiaries of all the subsidies and the checks that the government writes to help out with healthcare spending. And corporations are a direct beneficiary of monetary expansion through bank credit expansion. Banks lend money into existence. They've got $1 in reserves. They can create $9 new to lend out to somebody. And who's going to be the number one person that banks lend money to? It's going to be the large corporations. They're the most credit worthy, right? And so they're going to get the most money at the best rates. What are these corporations going to be spending this money on? Number one, they're going to be spending it on stuff that's going to grow their business. Number two, they're going to be spending it on stuff that's going to make their their shareholders more wealthy. And so they're going to be spending it on stuff that's going to make their stock price go up. And number three, they're going to be spending it on employees, right? And so all of these things then kind of directly go back into the economy, because all the money that goes to, let's say for employees, paychecks, all that money is getting spent into the economy again, which is just money going to other corporations, which ultimately, from the corporations spending money on raw materials to make their product, or spending it on employees, who those employees then go out and buy products, goods, services. Ultimately, all this stuff is starting to bid up the prices of everything in the system, because you've got a lot of new money pouring in from the government and from bank credit expansion. New money, more money than it's the money supply is growing faster than the rate of growth in the economy. And so that's pushing up prices. There's more money chasing the same amount of goods and services. So when prices then go up everywhere, what are those prices for? They're prices of goods, services, assets that belong to corporations. What does that do? That means revenues go up. When revenues go up, that means stock prices go up. So asset values go up as a result of that as well. When revenues and share prices go up for a corporation, what do you think that does to the debt that they're holding? It makes it really easy to pay off, right? It makes it much easier to pay off when you're bringing in a lot more income. It's not so much that the dollars are worth less, it's that you're getting so many more dollars. Ultimately, not much has changed in the economy. It's just there's more money chasing the same goods and services. And so you get more money for basically what you were doing before, because prices went up, your stock went up, you can pay off that debt way easier now. So yes, you need income to go up in order to make debt easier to pay off, just like the government, same with corporations, but guess what? Incomes go up. Now you're thinking, aha, this is where I got you, because we're most worried about individuals, because individuals aren't the main, especially the less wealthy half of America, right? Not the direct beneficiaries of corporate government contracts, not the main beneficiaries of corporate revenues going up, because by and large, they're not asset holders. They don't own stocks. And so individuals, this is the crux of the issue. This is why we're going to experience an economic collapse, a deflationary collapse, because that money's not getting into the hands of individuals. And if that money's not getting into the hands of individuals, that means individuals' prices are going up, cost of living is increasing, but if wages don't increase proportionally to the amount that the cost of living is going up by, which is more than 2%, that means that their cost of living, that means that life actually gets harder. Life actually gets more expensive. Who cares if they have debt? They have debt now, and the rest of their stuff just gets more expensive. They're no better off. And here is the ugly fact of the matter. Inflation hits wages last. The first place that new money creation hits is going to be asset prices. Then it trickles down to the prices of goods and services. Then finally trickles down to wages. So this is the real trickle-down effect. This is how new money infiltrates the economy and affects prices along the way. By the time the wage increases reach the average worker, prices have already moved up past where they were before. So governments get to buy stuff cheapest because the prices haven't changed yet. They create new money, buy everything at the old prices. Then that money works its way through the system, bids up prices along the way, and by the time individuals get their hands on that extra money, all the prices have already moved up. And so they've had to spend that time before they got the new money buying stuff at more expensive costs. And now that they have the new money, they're no better off than they were before. They're kind of right back in the same situation, but they had to spend all that time before they got the new money paying the new prices. And so they're actually worse off. Now, eventually this starts to cause civil unrest. Wealth inequality steepens. Asset holders get wealthy. Non-asset holders get more poor. And then the wage raises that do come too little and too late. All right, so at this point, you're probably thinking that I've thoroughly destroyed the argument that inflation makes debt easier to pay off Maybe not for corporations and governments, but at least for individuals. How could any sane individual at this point think it's a good idea to have any debt at all? Because if prices are going up, I want to make sure that I don't have any price or cost responsibilities. I want to get all of the costs, get my expenses as low as possible, pay off that debt so that when prices go up, I can at least absorb that bump. Because if you're making $50,000 a year, the prices of everything goes up, but you don't get a raise, all of your debt does is hurt you because your life gets harder. The prices going up didn't make your life easier. Now enter reality. When somebody's costs go up, that's another person's income that goes up. One person's cost is another person's income because you're paying for something that directly goes in to somebody else's bank account. Now you're saying, yes, that individuals are transferring all their money to the wealthy and the corporations and the government. I get that. So the fact of the matter is when we get to this point in societies, and it's happened many times throughout history, read When Money Dies by Adam Ferguson. He talks about the Weimar Republic, hyperinflation, and there's a lot of similarities leading up to that hyperinflation period of time that we're experiencing right now. Great book. But when we get to this point in society, wage increases start rolling in like crazy. Did you know that 2020 average incomes were actually up compared to 2019? Yes, it's average, but incomes were actually up. People got a lot of money from the stimulus checks and from unemployment insurance compared to what they would have gotten if 2019 had repeated itself. This in spite of the fact that we had record joblessness and record unemployment and record underemployment, record fall in GDP. We have an economic crisis unfolding. Incomes went up. Here's the reality. Helicopter money is here to stay. Call it whatever you want. Universal basic income, general basic income, welfare, socialism, stimulus checks, unemployment insurance. Government paychecks are here to stay. And more than likely, they will also be accompanied with federally mandated minimum wage hikes. This will give the political appearance of trying to deal with the wealth inequality by punishing predatory pricing, when these price increases are really just facilitated by all the crazy money printing and monetary expansion that's happening. And here's why helicopter money is here to stay. They have to do this. The other option is complete societal breakdown. It's civil unrest. It's riots and protests everywhere. It's the politician's worst nightmare. When too many people can no longer afford to feed their families, civil unrest breaks out everywhere. So they increase the money that's going out. They increase the federally mandated minimum wage hikes. They send out more unemployment insurance. They send out more stimulus checks, hand out more money because then at least temporarily people can afford to feed and house themselves again. Eventually costs go up again. That means corporate revenues go up. That means asset prices and tax receipts go up. Now just because tax increases will go up from this really isn't a big deal for the government debt because they can, their spending, number one, is going to way outpace the amount of increase in income that they're going to get. And so the debt that they're going to have is going to balloon. But ultimately, nobody's concerned about that because we got the Fed. But this cycle continues. Prices go up, riots erupt, more money is handed out, causing prices to go up further. Repeating the cycle. This accelerates the wealth divide, remember, because prices going up means revenues go up, which means corporation values, stock prices go up, asset prices go up because the wealthy start putting their money into assets because they're getting so much this money and they see that everything is going up in prices. So they're buying more and more assets, which drives the prices of assets up, which makes their wealth on paper worth even more, drives wealth inequality even further. At this point, fixed rate debt becomes a blip on the radar. It becomes inconsequential. When your government checks are $20,000 a month, your $3,000 mortgage will cost you the same as dinner for two at a sit-down restaurant. So when people say inflation wipes out debt and inflation makes debt easier to pay off, this is the assumption built into it, is that eventually, whether it's government, whether it's corporations, whether it's individuals, incomes go up in response to prices across the board going up, which is a response to all the new money flooding into the system. It becomes much, much, much easier to get your hands on the same quantity of money that 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago was comparatively a lot of money. And now because the quality of those dollars goes down, the quantity is so much that it's much easier to get your hands on those dollars. Everybody's income goes up as a result. The average person doesn't get richer from this. I want to be clear. Just because your income goes to $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 for, waiting tables at the Cheesecake Factory, that doesn't mean your purchasing power goes up. But it does mean that fixed rate debt, where the dollars you owe, the number of dollars you owe won't change, that gets easier to pay off over time. We're entering into a period of a massive wealth transfer from the lenders to the debtors. As always, I really appreciate you guys. You guys are the best. Have a great day.